Hello and welcome to the African Tech Roundup, episode 64 for the week ending Monday, July 4th, 2016. This is where we round up the week's most important tech, digital, and innovation news from across the African continent. My name is Andile Masugu. Happy birthday to the United States of America. The US is our biggest audience outside the African continent, so shout out to you, America, for listening in. And indeed for contributing to the growth and development of many of Africa's brightest tech talents. Kudos to you for that. Now, joining me on the show today on this fair 4th of July is a very good friend of the show, the very American co-founder and CEO of Delve.io, Trevor Wolf. How's it going, Trevor?
Howdy, Andile. Good to be back with you guys. And I want to say happy birthday and happy Independence Day to the British, who are the first time celebrating Independence Day this year with the Americans.
That's a really good one. And then you had to keep it really American by going howdy as well. Yeah. Do people still use howdy in the States?
Only 1/4 of the country.
Well, that would include you today, but fantastic. Thanks for joining us today.
It's good to be here.
You cheeky. Yeah, the British are certainly independent at the moment. So let's see how that goes for them. The last time you featured on the show, though, was early last year. But since then, you founded a startup. You more recently just got back from Europe and the States, and you successfully closed a round of funding for your business, for your new startup. And you've gotten some rather posh recognition. I'm really looking forward to catching up with you and having you share some of your experiences with me.
It's been a whirlwind of a year for us, and looking forward to diving into a little bit more later on.
All of you listening, it's definitely one not to miss. It's all coming up later. But first is this week's news. Renewable energy project in Nigeria, Madagascar, and Sierra Leone getting a financial boost. eBay set to launch an e-commerce service in Nigeria in partnership with Mall of Africa. Scientists discovering a massive helium gas field in Tanzania, and in Kenya, Safaricom promising to compensate subscribers who experience poor call quality. Definitely lots of news to get to, but do remember, if you've missed any of our past episodes, you can head to africantechroundup.com and do give us a shout on social media because we love hearing from you. You can find us on Twitter at African Roundup, on Facebook at facebook.com/African Tech Roundup, and the website is, of course, africantechroundup.com. Before we go any further, though, this episode of the African Tech Roundup is brought to you by FreshBooks. Now, FreshBooks is offering listeners of the African Tech Roundup a 30-day free trial to put their service to the test. FreshBooks is the easy-to-use invoicing software designed to help you get organized, save time invoicing, and most importantly, get paid faster. To find out what all the fuss is about, go on, try it out for free at gofreshbooks.com/African Tech. And now on to this week's news. We start with some encouraging news. 3 African renewable energy projects from Nigeria, Madagascar, and Sierra Leone have beaten nearly 100 other entrants to win the $7 million Access co-development facility run by power project operator Access Power. Now, they're a firm with a footprint in 15 countries across Africa and the Middle East. And the 3 companies that won this money are Aegis PLC from Sierra Leone, Mentac Energy from Nigeria, and Stucky Limited from Madagascar. And they're all set to share that money as well as benefit from technical support designed to bring their renewable energy projects to life. Sounding good, don't you think, Trevor?
I love seeing companies outside of South Africa and Kenya in Africa getting some recognition. So go Madagascar, go Sierra Leone.
And I mean, these are certainly companies doing a lot. Aegis PLC runs a 25-megawatt solar project in Sierra Leone, while Mentac Energy operates a 50-megawatt wind project in Nigeria. Stucky runs a 25-megawatt hydro and solar project in Madagascar. Collectively, these 3 projects are poised to deliver electricity to an impressive 340,000 African households. Now, that deserves a hat tip.
Good for the continent and good for these startups that they're getting the recognition they deserve.
Absolutely. Now, another startup that's set to get a leg up thanks to a much-needed financial injection is the Zimbabwean online business-to-business platform Isaja for Africa. They've reportedly secured an undisclosed investment amount from a Hong Kong-based VC. Now, some good news from my home country, which is currently braving some very, very tough economic times. Shout out to the young Clinton Mutambo and his team for landing this investment. Now, you might recall that Clinton made Forbes Africa's 30 under 30 list last year. Now, it would have been nice, helpful even, to get a little more detail around the deal, but hey.
Maybe you can ask Clinton for some more information.
Here's the thing, though. Why do you think it's so hard to get specifics around deals like this on the continent? In other parts of the world, it's almost a bragging point, if not just a point of information that's quite important for startups to be able to confidently get the next round of funding.
I'm guessing it has more to do with the institutional investor rather than the startup wanting to share their news. I think we all know that entrepreneurs would be very happy to disclose the success and the backing that they get, but sometimes general partners and limited partners and funds don't want that information revealed, especially if it's a new continent, a new investment in a new continent for them. So maybe there's some nervous Hong Kong investors that were not wanting to disclose everything.
Solid point there, Trevor. Now, there's a startup called Tress that's also making waves. They've built an app that aims to help black women around the world discover and share new hairstyles, and they've been selected to be part of the well-respected Y Combinator Fellowship Program. Now, Tress is founded by Priscilla Hazel, Esther Olatunde, and Cassandra Safo. All three women are software entrepreneurs from Ghana and Nigeria. They met at MEST, which is the Meltwater Entrepreneurial School of Technology. We certainly wish them the best as they work through YC's 8-week program. I'm certainly hoping that they make the most of all the advice and the industry access that YC participants typically get access to. And most importantly, here's to hoping they land investors who believe in their rather important cause. Yes, hair is important, people. And sidebar, Trevor, have you heard reports that Jay-Z's streaming service Tidal is said to be in talks with Apple about being acquired?
I have. It's patience is finally paying off for Jay-Z. He's had a rough couple years trying to get this project launched, but finally getting some recognition from Apple, and this will be their second hip-hop star that they've made into maybe a billionaire.
And you know what? It didn't work out with Samsung. They had talks with them some months ago. They didn't come to anything. I can't help rooting for Tidal to prove all the haters wrong, and not because I'm this massive Jay-Z fan. He's a decent rapper, to be sure, but I do, like you say, hope he walks away with a deal that allows him and. Granted, his partners are all superstars, super rich co-investors, and who probably don't need the money. But it'd be really nice to have a success story come out of, a guy who came out of the streets. I know they don't need the money, but hey, what a story! What a movie that'd make.
I hope that they also allow him to remain a part of the brand going forward, like they did with Dr. Dre and the Beats acquisition. So I don't think Jay-Z is done launching Tidal. I think he's going to be a big part of it, and I hope Apple allows him to do that.
Maybe if he brings Beyonce to the to the negotiations and dangles her like a carrot and be like, well, if you want B, you got to take me. I don't know.
Maybe this is Tim Cook's strategic acquisition.
Oh, he really wants Beyonce.
Yeah, I think he knew what he was doing. He's a smart guy.
Well, people are saying that Apple's interest in this particular acquisition is because of the one thing Tidal seems to have gotten really, really right, as the press has been merciless in pointing out all the things they've failed at as they set out to do it. But certainly their relationship with some of the world's biggest artists and their ability to woo them to this platform exclusively, at least in the initial launch of their projects, is something that Apple is quite interested in getting.
It's also a huge investment in a media platform. I know Apple's built quite a few of their own, but as they try to hedge some of their hardware sales slowdown, I wonder if this is a way for them to kind of branch into a new vertical a little bit more aggressively than they have in the past.
Indeed you do. Now, on to the next. See what I did there?
What?
That's a Jay-Z lyric.
Oh, damn, sorry.
Somebody doesn't listen to Jay-Z up here.
I've been away from America for a while, so I've been listening to some local guys.
That's a nice comeback. That's a really good comeback because it's like, nah, I'm all about Africa at the moment.
TKZ.
What's that? Yeah, all right. Listen, back to the continent now, to East Africa next, where Federico Pirzio Biroli, I hope I'm saying that right, the founder of London VC fund Playfair Capital. Now, he's planning to move to East Africa to become an angel investor. Now, his fund plans to close down its co-working space at Warner Yard in central London. If you're not familiar with the work Playfair does, they specialize in artificial intelligence and machine learning, huge buzzwords in the global VC scene. Playfair's invested in startups such as Stripe, StreetHub, Hassel, and Stratajet. He believes that angel investing in Africa can make a big difference to economies on the continent, perhaps to a much greater degree than in London, where he's been operating since 2010. What do you think of this, Trevor?
I mean, I think it's borne out by the research. Projects in Nigeria and South Africa are showing that economic development is easier to do through job creation through startups than it is government grants or doing traditional money transfers or skills training. So I think he's right that the economies here will benefit from his investments.
How much of that decision do you think is influenced by the recent Brexit debacle?
It'd be a nice time to get your money out of Europe, or at least hedge for the inevitability of a shaky, rough 3 years. So I think he's smart, but I'm sure he's also seeing potential here. It's not just a pure financial decision.
That's true. He's also said that London is now flooded with early stage funding for technology startups, as well as the market for co-working space has become far too competitive. I suppose investors in his fund who might be worried that he's leaving London altogether shouldn't worry too much because Playfair Capital won't be closing its doors completely. He'll be handing control over to his remaining staff and preparing to become a limited rather than a general partner. So the question that remains is, where is he headed to exactly in East Africa? There's been a lot of speculation about where exactly he might go. For many people, Kenya seems to be the logical destination, but Rwanda's on the rise, I figure. You can't discount Tanzania, where a good friend of the show, Mbwana Ali of Savannah Fund, has chosen to live. Granted, he flies in and out of Kenya quite frequently. Perhaps even Uganda. What do you think?
Well, I think Nairobi is, like you said, is the obvious choice, but I wouldn't discount Rwanda or Kigali's potential of recruiting him because they seem to have all the ingredients for a tech ecosystem that would be perfect for an investor to come in and play a pivotal role in. But I also like Kampala. I think Kampala is an undervalued asset, has great access to all the other East African countries, so I think that could be on his list as well.
That's something I didn't quite think about. It might be worth his while to roll into a lesser city, and by lesser I mean perhaps in size and in profile, not because the people are any worse or better. Okay, so don't write us any letters, y'all. But yeah, maybe he might roll up into like a Kampala and just be the Don from day one.
Big dog in a small pond.
Absolutely. Now, listen, I caught up with Toro Orero this week. He's the managing partner of the Silicon Valley-based VC Draper Darkflow. He's in partnership, of course, with the very well-known venture capitalist Tim Draper. And one of the things I asked him to let me in on are the pros and cons of running an Africa-focused VC enterprise from outside Africa, in this case, the U.S., Silicon Valley specifically. Take a listen to what he said.
So I travel extensively. I actually spend half my time, or 60 to 70% of my time here on the continent. So right now I'm in Accra. So the advantage of running an Africa-focused, Silicon Valley Africa-focused VC fund is this. The advantage is, okay, first of all, what I've noticed is just the currency differences. So, and the cost of living. So a typical example is this. San Francisco, for example, which is right now the US's most expensive city, investing $100K in a startup is literally just giving them probably a 3-month runway or 6-month runway or something, 4-month runway. So meaning they're going to run out of money after the first quarter, right? Investing $100K in a Nigerian or South African startup is a whole lot more, right? So having a fund domiciled in Silicon Valley and investing is not like in Africa is actually a cheaper deal than investing in Silicon Valley. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. More bang for buck, certainly.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, dollars go a lot further here. The other advantage is, at least the other advantage I think is from the Silicon Valley and specifically Draper point of view is we're blessed to have big global presence and a big global brand. So we usually are deals just keep coming to us every day, regardless of if we're actively sourcing for or not. Because people hear, oh, Draper now has an office in Africa. Boom, let's get to them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's also like a big advantage. Because we have, many people talk about, there's usually a value proposition of, we have Silicon Valley connections, but, there's did you know this fun fact, by the way? Tim Draper's granddad is actually the one that, wrote the VC playbook in Silicon Valley that we use today. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Well, now you do.
Wow.
So they come from that like long, deep legacy and history,
which you obviously benefit from directly. It's the brand equity there is incredible, I'd imagine.
Oh yeah, totally. So and that's what started to recognize. Started to recognize that, you know what, I have a product. if I need an intro to the CEO of Twitter or Mark Zuckerberg or anyone in Silicon Valley, I can get that.
Gotcha.
Right. So because of that, we get lots of pitches, lots of decks. We want to meet with us, partner with us, work with us, and that's fantastic. That's an advantage that we really, really appreciate and we hold dearly, and we maximize to the benefit of the startups. Now, disadvantage, like you said, will probably be maybe okay, from the startup point of view, thinking that we just have all the money in the world to throw away, So, and
come on, what's $1 million to you guys?
$1 million is capital that can be made back, and want to make that 10x. So
gotcha. Yeah, but I'm sure you get that a lot.
Yeah, so it's not a charity. It's not, exactly. Yeah, what's $1 million you get? So it's not a charity. We don't just throw away cash. Every single dollar is carefully invested, because it's an investment fund. It's a venture capital fund. So we get a lot of, they don't want to, just give us the money anyway and see how it goes. I think that's probably maybe the only one.
Fair enough. And I'm curious about
another one, by the way. Another one. Sorry to cut you. Another one.
Problem.
Is probably some people thinking that we are not African. But I tend to correct people that, you know what, I was actually born and raised and grew up here. So I totally get the gist and of every single challenge you're facing now and even could possibly face from this very unique African experience and point of view. So, yeah.
Right, there's certainly many good reasons to be based in a major global tech center like Silicon Valley, Tel Aviv, or London, or wherever. But many good reasons to be right here on the continent as well. So many thanks to you, Toro Orero of Draper Darkflow, for those insights. We had a splendid conversation. You can follow me on Twitter at Masuku Andile for the link to it. That's at MASUKU. ANDILE. And Trevor, you aren't in the VC game just yet, but what in the way of a heads up about coming to play in Africa would you give to Mr. Persio Biroli before he lands on the continent?
I would definitely encourage him to carve out a section of his fund dedicated to very, very early stage, maybe even pre-revenue startups. I think there's a big gap in the VC market for those type of opportunities. Obviously higher risk for him, but if he spreads it across 10, 20 startups, I think he might get some very undervalued deals, build better relationships with the founders. And speaking about the founders, I would also encourage him to really consider what European and American VCs have done very well, which is build a platform or operations team dedicated to supporting their portfolio companies. A lot of the venture capital firms here in East, West, and South Africa kind of neglect that part where after post-investment they could be adding a lot of value in terms of proper accountancy, marketing support, publicity support, business development, legal. A lot of startups here don't have the resources to hire all those staff members, so a platform team would go a lot further in Africa than it would in Europe and America, yet few VCs are actually doing that.
Interesting to note how much time Toro, for example, spends on the African continent, how important that is. Also, his involvement with Speed Up Africa, where African startups get to pitch to Tim Draper directly and also benefit from this amazing network of individuals that he brings to support them way past the stage where they actually just receive the money and run. There's a lot of support, I guess, that VCs need to be in a position to offer startups once they've made investments.
Yeah, it's a unique ability to the venture capital game is the ability to influence the outcome of your investments, which most private capital investors in the stock markets don't get to really influence the companies, the big, large corporates that they invest in. In the VC world, it's a pretty obvious desire to want to support your startups post-investment through marketing, through legal, through business development. So the startups need it, the founders need it, and the VCs here have an opportunity to support these startups.
Here's to hoping Mr. Persio Biroli is listening in and takes your advice. And here's to hoping I haven't butchered his name to the point where he doesn't even know we're talking to him.
Hope he also considers Johannesburg. I know he's looking at East Africa, but we'll welcome with open arms in Johannesburg.
Ha ha, you heard it here, sir. Bring it on to Joburg. Well, staying with East African news, though, scientists from Durham and Oxford in the UK have discovered a major helium gas deposit in the Tanzanian Rift Valley. Now, it turns out that this find is so significant that it could single-handedly ease the global shortage of helium. I had no idea helium was in such short supply. Now, the scientists who are working in partnership with the Norwegian helium exploration firm Helium One have reportedly been using high-tech methods to actively search for this precious gas instead of simply relying on accidental discoveries that occurred during the drilling for oil or mining of minerals. Now, I recently found out that helium isn't just handy for helping people who inhale it to sound like Bugs Bunny, but it's also crucial for the functioning of MRI scanners, space exploration vehicles, and the production of nuclear energy. I continuously get blown by how much potential we have in terms of raw material that the rest of the world relies on Africa for. And I suppose that, there's such potential for us to harness this ourselves, add value to it, and perhaps even take it to market ourselves. It's just getting that right, though, it seems to be such a difficult thing for the continent.
Yeah, I mean, it's in one sense, it's a shame that it took a Norwegian firm to explore and have the funds to investigate these natural resources, but hopefully also encouraging for local firms to set up shop, set up some R&D into parts of Africa that we haven't yet tapped into.
And two UK-based universities, when we've got dozens on the continent doing amazing research, but perhaps, not enough.
Yeah, sometimes there needs to be a commercial interest involved in investigating, and I think that the next 5 to 10 years we'll start seeing lot more local firms making these big discoveries.
Here's to hoping, eh? So to Kenya next, where Safaricom is said to be instituting new policies aimed at improving the customer experience for its voice, data, and SMS services. I think I hear a corporate cheer as far as we are from Kenya. I think a lot of people have been quite eagerly anticipating what Safaricom might do to start improving the level of service it delivers, given their dominance in that space. But according to their CEO, Bob Collymore, the operator now handles 30 million calls and 70 million SMSs per hour. And so they're looking to improve the call quality, as is right to do, given how much money they're making off the Kenyan public. And now look, on average, the network says that they experience something like a 0.3% call drop rate. Look, it's marginally low, granted, but it does represent an average of something like 90,000 calls dropped every single hour. Now, to remedy the situation, Safaricom plans to compensate customers with up to 60 seconds of call time for every call dropped. So the plan is, when your call gets dropped, Safaricom will send you an SMS with an apology and a reimbursement of up to 60 seconds. They have given people a heads up who might abuse the service that they'll only be providing up to 5 refunds per day per subscriber. And this is one of the new measures they've put in place to sort of guarantee services. And it's gone live this week. Tell us, Kenya, if you've experienced the service and you're grateful for it, you've got the SMS, you got the 60 seconds, it worked well, it made you feel nice and warm inside. More than that, it makes you less likely to move to one of their competitors. We want to hear about that. Give us a shout on Twitter and tell us all about it at African Roundup. In the meantime, though, I have to hand it to Safaricom for at least trying to solve a problem, which in South Africa, for example, has been something we've complained about. But I'm glad Safaricom seems to be leading the way in this area.
We hope it sets a nice precedent for all mobile telecoms executives around the continent to adopt this policy too.
Yes, I mean, let's start maybe with the biggest one, the biggest one on the continent, certainly going through its fair share of trial and tribulation at the moment. It might be a good way for us to all start feeling sorry for MTN.
I don't know. I don't think we're there yet.
We've got a hard nut to crack here. But to Nigeria next, where Chinese mobile text and voice messaging service WeChat has shut down its Nigeria office. It's now exclusively running operations from South Africa. Now, WeChat in Africa is managed by Naspers, who have invested in WeChat's parent company, Tencent. This famously lucrative investment has done really well for Naspers. However, another Naspers outfit that has reportedly cut its physical presence in Nigeria is PriceCheck. It's a service that allows users to compare product prices across thousands of categories. Now, this move comes after months of denials from key personnel, even staff members, that people were being laid off, and all indications pointing towards gradual termination were false and that kind of thing. WeChat's done quite well, at least as far as they tell us. They carried out a very aggressive brand awareness and user acquisition campaign, cash giveaways, celebrity endorsements, startup competitions. We've been told that the app has a significant user base, thought to be in the millions of users. So why they choose to leave Nigeria seems to be a bit of a mystery.
Yeah, I mean, one wonders if it's a matter of the local economy there in Nigeria or the fierce competition for real-time chat apps.
Or maybe they've just figured out a way to manage the platform from a remote location and really don't need to be in Nigeria.
Yeah, I mean, consolidating overhead and staffing is obviously a good business decision when it works, but one wonders if there's something else going on.
Absolutely. Look, there definitely are signs that growth at Naspers is slowing. There's definitely increased competition across all its major platforms and service offerings from players on the continent and beyond. Everyone and everything from Netflix to Jumia and all the brands they manage. And I do believe it's beginning to take its toll on the continent's most valuable tech firm. I guess when you're the biggest player on the field, you're bound to take a beating. Just ask MTN. And I'm sure Naspers is looking for ways to cut costs and become more efficient and not just rely on being the biggest. A focus might be on improving revenues over time as well as improving profitability.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time that Naspers shut down a business. They are known in the industry for being able to cut their losses, so to speak, before the blood is dried.
Yeah, I suppose when you're a startup founder, you're hanging on there till the dying seconds. You're literally going down with the ship, as it were. But Naspers probably doesn't have a hint of emotion in that area.
No, they've gone through this process once or twice before.
Well, we'll certainly be keeping an eye out on their moves for sure. Now, finally, one of South Africa's largest startup surveys has revealed some startling data. And that is the fact that entrepreneurship doesn't seem to be leading to job creation. Well, at least not yet anyway. Now, the survey was conducted by Seed Academy, a social enterprise that provides business support and mentorship. Now, according to Seed Academy, startups are taking really long periods of time to gain traction, with some going as long as 5 years without making any sales. Only 4% of entrepreneurs surveyed apparently employ more than 10 staff. And up to 38% of startup entrepreneurs don't employ staff at all. This is pretty interesting information.
Yeah, but I wouldn't read this as a indication that entrepreneurship or startups is not a good vehicle for economic development. I think it's just more of a sign that startups here in the African continent are fragile and are not getting the support to make it past that critical early stage that they are in other developing markets. So I think this is more an indication that startups need more support rather than they're not a good vehicle for private sector development.
I suppose the news might come as a shock to politicians, specifically in South Africa. Now, if you live in South Africa, you'll know that over the last decade or so, entrepreneurship has featured really heavily in government rhetoric. It's often cited as the greatest hope for improving the country's growing unemployment problem. I sort of favor that position in many respects. While job creation should be a key outcome of entrepreneurial activity, I think perhaps one of the things we've all underestimated is the role of tech in influencing how products and services are made and delivered in the new world. Perhaps we just don't need as many people at companies to deliver the kind of value we've come to expect.
Yeah, there's definitely a law of diminishing returns when it comes to staff counts at startups. I think the goal is to hire enough people to service the company. But at a certain point, the technology that the startup is employing should be taking over some of the additional capacity. So there's not a direct linear correlation between startup job growth and the success that they're having.
Perhaps in the interim, we'll take a hit, but I'm sure overall this should pay off.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about South Africa, the National Development Program says that 90% of jobs by 2030 will be developed by SMEs. So they could either focus on the 8.9 million micro enterprises that needed to hit that number, or they can focus on developing 45,000 startups between 5 and 200 employees. So I think it's a lot easier to reach economic transformation, economic development by focusing on startups than a traditional mom and pop store. But we have a long way to go to figure out how to support those startups.
I totally agree. Now, that's the week's headlines, folks. Thank you so much for factoring in on this week's stories, Trevor. You're fresh from Europe and the States. I am dying to catch up with you. You've been pitching dozens of people, rubbing shoulders with some impressive investor types, talented startup founders, winning innovation awards and taking numbers. I imagine you have some interesting insights around what it takes to found a startup on the continent while continuing to maintain a global outlook. But before you share what's top of mind for you in terms of all that, let's take a listen to a clip from a conversation I had with Maya Morgan Famudu. She's a Nigerian Swedish American based in Silicon Valley, and she leads investment tours via her firm Ingressive. Now, I asked her to contrast the vibe of Silicon Valley with various tech ecosystems on the continent, and this is what she had to say.
I'll give you one example of Silicon Valley relative to Silicon Sahara or of Lagos Tech. We led a tour to Lagos in September of last year, and one of the traveling investors who came along with us actually started crying at one of the pitch competitions. And after we went aside, and I said, "What's happening? Where is this coming from?" And she said, "I didn't realize the hustle and the ingenuity. I didn't realize going to the continent, people would be not only as smart as everyone that we have here in Silicon Valley, but hustling 5 times as hard." And so, if you're a founder building a company on the continent, you have incomparable barriers to entry, hurdles, inefficiencies, challenges, just, to get, especially in Nigeria, to get from your office to the next meeting, even the transport time is just ridiculous, crazy barriers that people in Silicon Valley will never even fathom. So I want to commend people who are able to successfully build companies, especially tech companies on the continent, with Wi-Fi costs, with energy costs, with transportation, with all of these craziness. So that's one thing in comparing the two markets. As far as Silicon Valley, what it's like on the day-to-day, the biggest differentiator is that everyone is warm to and willing to and immediately available to provide introductions to connect you where you need to go. Of course, everyone has an idea. You go, "Oh, I'm building the Twitter for cats, the AI drone, blah, 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 VR, high tech, SaaS based enterprise pod," just so that lingo, that dialogue, I'm used to it. I don't even realize I'm numb to it these days. But so that of course, that concentration of everyone, of everyone building and creating. But there are 2 other things here that aren't as prevalent elsewhere. And one is the innovation thinking. So everyone is constantly walking around sniffing for a problem that they have that other people are coming to, because that's the crux of entrepreneurship. That's the crux of scalable business. Is I have this problem and my friend has this problem and his friend has this problem, and there's got to be at least 10,000 people in the city alone, and maybe 5 million, 50 million, 1 billion people in the world who share this same problem. So it's people going around with the idea that here's a local problem and I have the skills and the resources to create the solution. And there are people with lots of money sniffing around them trying to find who has the best one. So, of course it can get crazy. Of course it's like, did you seriously just fund that person there's a lot of free-flowing capital. I'll leave it at that. But it's a very inspirational, it's a very exciting place, because everyone who comes here leaves with a sense of, I can do that. I can do it because other people are doing it. And also because anyone with a good idea and passion and the drive and the dedication can create a solution that impacts a lot of other people.
Now, Maya's given us a sense of, what the vibe is like at Silicon Valley. Obviously, if you listen to the whole conversation I had with her, she went on to give me a sense of reality around, in as much as all this, this innovative thinking is going on. It's as hard as anywhere else in the world to get funding for a good idea or get an idea off the ground and that kind of thing, which is great. You've had the benefit over the last few months to build a startup concept right here on the continent and then go shopping around all over the world for interest in it. And the response has been really good. What have you come away with?
Well, I think that a lot of people are noticing what Maya did, is that a lot of African entrepreneurs have a natural disposition to finding and wanting to solve problems. I think that's one thing that investors took meetings with me for. If I came to them and I've started building a company, I think a lot of them expected and assumed that I've identified a unique problem to the local continent already. So it was kind of nice, is that the perceptions of African hustle, as Maya said, is actually contributing to investors' appetite for the continent.
So now speak specifically to Delve. I mean, when we last spoke, you featured on the African Tech Conversations podcast, which I host also, and also on this podcast. You were then the MD of Springleap. You since transitioned to your own business. Tell us a little bit about that business and how you've gone around shopping for interest in it, how you landed investment, and what you won awards for.
So I think one of the biggest things we started with was defining whether we were going to be a African startup that served the African continent or an African startup that was building its operations, its base, its headquarters here, but serving a global market. We ultimately decided on the latter with some nuance. And so I think that helped us secure some meetings as well, as we went to investors and we said, here's our big global ambitions, here's how we can transform a global industry. We happen to be based in South Africa, which has amazing talent and one of the lowest burn rates you'll ever see. So your money is going to be going to fuel growth, not to pay for a fancy office, huge bloated salaries. So I think that was part of our journey, was revisiting what we did at Springleap, and then defining how we want to position ourselves to the global investors. And ultimately it paid off. Our first capital in was from a UK-based investor. He loved our team, he loved our product, he loved what we were building, but also knew that we could service a global market through our headquarters here in South Africa. Once that money was in, though, it's also helped get local investors interested. I think getting some international recognition for your startup as actually convinces or more reassuring to local investors, local clients, local media. Anyways, it's all gelling now. We got nominated for Innovation Awards from South Africa's largest bank. Got into the Endeavor network globally, so they flew us out to Spain. It was out of 20,000 applicants. We were one of 50 that made it past the program. And yeah, so it's now into the next chapter of our growth story.
And so you're a research-based business. Explain your value proposition and what makes it uniquely positioned, not just to service African problems, but to service global problems. And was that something you thought about when starting out?
Yeah, I mean, so we knew what a pain we wanted to solve, which is over $1 trillion are spent on advertising activity a year. By any conservative estimate, 50% of that is spent imprudently, so on bad advertising, and 50% of that $1 trillion doesn't work at driving sales, being locally relevant, making consumers become loyal fans. And so we wanted to figure out what was going on in the creative process. Why is it that agencies, big well-known agencies, aren't producing the best work repeatedly? It's like a once-off hit. And a lot of it came down to agency business models are changing and transforming. There's no longer tons of time for an agency to sit around and come up with huge ideas and 10 people sitting around a coffee table and giving each other open and collaborative feedback at every step of the creative process. And that's because margins are shrinking, clients' budgets are shrinking, and agencies are having to reduce headcount. Which means for us that there's a glutton of freelance creatives around the world and still a need for those people to add value to the creative process. So we went around the world gathering up all those creatives, put them onto a platform, learned about 50 pieces of information about what they are. And just like Uber's connecting independent drivers with people in need, we're finding brands that literally, or agencies that literally just want feedback on their creative concept before they spend R1 million or spend $1 million on media budget, and allowing these people to work on these teams, adding value to the creative process, testing ideas, coming up with bigger concepts, and introducing the campaign to other markets. And so we're reducing time and the money it takes to test your creative concepts now, but it's a very simple model. It's just a collective of over 100,000 creative professionals.
Right, and I'm sure you heard a lot of no's, when you pitched your idea, or people who, listened to you went, meh. What's the most common reason you heard from people who didn't think you were all that?
I think not a lot of them understood the market. So, any investor needs some type of background in the industry to be confident that you're trying to disrupt a very growing market or that there's an actual big enough market for you to dominate. So the ad testing market and the market research market, which is about a $45 billion industry globally, a lot of investors didn't know that existed, that $1 trillion was spent on advertising every year. So we had to kind of do a lot more reassuring about the size of the market, the size of the potential, and that we are the right people to be disrupting that market before we got any yeses.
I've been speaking to quite a few, players, senior players on the, Africa's tech scene, and a lot of them feel that local startups often look too far for love, as it were. What did you find lacking in terms of finding a local VC or a local, angel investor or something like that to invest here? What made you go as far as the UK to find someone to invest in this idea?
I think speed. I think a lot of your CEO or founder listeners will know that coming to a VC firm when you're pre-profitable, when you're making some money, but maybe you're not taking off like a hockey stick, and a lot of the VCs are just really scared about investing unless a business model is tried, proven, and tested, and is on its way up, and so. That culture of angel investing doesn't exist as predominantly in Africa as it does in Europe and in America. And we felt that we had hit our product market fit. We had a great team. We identified a great pain problem and how to distribute our products. But we happened to be pre-profitable. So we knew that a lot of the conversations here were going to be nice and friendly, but ultimately they would drag out into a no. So we looked at investors that were willing to take a bigger risk on us, and knowing that we would eventually hit that profitability point in the next year or so. But we knew that culture wasn't going to be found here.
That's interesting. Now, I asked Toro Orero what he and his partners at Draper Darkflow look for in a startup they might invest in. I think it also it will give us some insight into the difference in mindset you just described as far as VCs are concerned, in terms of perhaps local VCs and angel investors on the African continent are spoilt for choice. They're at the stage where there's just so much potential. They literally can weed out the almost or maybes and literally just back the winners at this stage, whereas perhaps people like Toro and his partners are more attuned to the risky, flying off the seat of your pants type scenario that Silicon Valley's become very famous for. Either way, I found what Toro had to say about what he and his partners look for in a startup very interesting. Take a listen.
So what I look for is passion. Passion is emotional, right? And people get emotional about things they love. So people that try to think about businesses from the strictly bottom line point of view, will most likely run away from the business when it doesn't make the business sense anymore.
Yeah.
But people that do businesses they love will figure out how to make it work regardless of whatever circumstances happen.
Right.
And those are the kind of people that exude passion most of the time. And that's usually the first thing by default that I look for. So what's the passion level? How excited are you about it? About what you're trying to do? You get the second thing I tend to look for is a certain level of delusion. So yeah. Is this person borderline nuts? Do I think he is really? Actually, the more stupid somebody, the more stupid quote unquote I think somebody is, the more interested I am in that person, because he clearly doesn't get something about how the world works.
Sure.
But he also clearly sees something about how the world works that we don't see as normal people. So yeah. The third thing I tend to look for, now all this is about the person, by the way, before the business. The third thing I tend to look for is this person a long-term guy or a short-term guy? So is this person a marketer or a visionary? I'll give an example. So, and I have nothing against the short term or the long term guy. It just helps me position what the deal is going to be. So a short term guy is what they call serial entrepreneurs, right? Where I want to do a business, sell it to LinkedIn in 5 years, and move on to the next thing. A long term guy is the guy that's going to stick to that business and grow it to become really, really big and make it the biggest in the world before thinking about doing something else, right? He's not thinking about the next thing. He's thinking about this thing as his life's calling. So yeah, so those are things I can look for. Now to the business part of it. One more thing. I look for how much fun the person has doing what he's doing. Yeah.
And how do you gauge that?
So actually, it depends. So how the person talks about what he's doing. So I'll give an example. Does the person think work is fun, for example? Is the person thinking TGIF, thank God it's Friday, whoo, I'm done with work, you know?
Weekend to weekend.
Yeah. Now, I'm not saying I'm looking for the workaholic, right? I think there's a place for rest and everything, but the person has to. Yeah, but the person has to be at home.
Basically,
at work, yeah.
I said to sum it up, really, you're looking for drive, you're looking for enthusiasm, and you're looking for someone who's and to determine at what on what gradient of the scale of sort of tenacity the person's at in terms of sticking with it.
Yeah, and delusion too. Delusion is really, really important to me. Yeah, that's very, very important to me. Yeah. So I'll write it back.
I love how seriously you say that. Like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Guy has to be absolutely nuts.
No.
Right.
So I'll give an example. So I'll rather probably, and this is just me, and this is just at this moment, right? But a person that ticks all the check boxes, Harvard, Stanford alum, Harvard MBA, has sold a startup to LinkedIn, has has a tiny experience, is actually a guy that I'll actually run away from. Because you are so improper and normal, and you have done all the right things, right? I'm looking for the guy that has done all the wrong things and will continue doing all the wrong things as long as he or she can learn as fast as possible. So back onto the business, right? For the business piece of it, I look for how big the startup is thinking. So are you thinking countrywide or continental-wide or global-wide? I tend to be more excited about people thinking about how they can change the world. So how your technology can affect the whole world. So for example, we're using Skype right now. Skype was a startup, the team backed from Estonia. But when you think about Skype, you think about Skype as a global company. Their product has changed the way we communicate. So I tend to tilt toward ideas that are that big, that are that daring, that are that bold. So big markets, big world, big problems, borderline impossible problems. The second thing about that I tend to look out for is what is the unique insight that this person knows about this business that I probably don't know or that other people don't know. So that's also really sometimes very important. And so it's usually not about the data. It's more about how the entrepreneur interprets the data it has. Data is everywhere, but how do you convert that data to knowledge?
Right.
And so I say that that's like a very, very big thing. I've seen over the course of like my short visa career so far, I've seen you start to see patterns in fintech, you start to see patterns in how people pitch, right? But what I start looking for is what lies outside those patterns, because the patterns get boring. And the final thing I look for in the business is the team. So now, not the team in the cliche way, they have to complement each other, blah, 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 blah. Because, I mean, that's like, everybody team. But what I look for is just what I think, are they lethal executors? Did you ever watch 24?
Yes, I did.
Are they Jack Bauer?
Jack Bauer. Do they aim
That's
straight
it.
and get the target every time, all the
Will
time?
they get this done? No. Jack didn't necessarily get it done all the time. He actually spent like some years in China in jail and stuff.
Oh,
So,
yeah, of course. So with some
However,
detours involved, of course.
Exactly. Yeah. In fact, many details involved,
Yeah.
breaking many rules. But the thing is, do I believe that they will get this
They
done
will get it done,
regardless?
yeah.
Are there people that think of, are there people that let excuses get in the way, or are there people that will trek from Sierra Leone to South Africa just to get a meeting?
Yeah, I totally get you.
No, this is the whole chicken and egg dilemma between investors and startups. Investors go, "Oh, you're too early. Go and build a business before you come to me for money." And the startup goes, "But how can I build my business if I don't have your money in the first place?" And the loop continues.
Right.
So, over the last few weeks, I've been telling a couple of startups, don't think about yourself as a startup. Think about yourself as a small business. Right. So, when you are, let's say, the roadside suya guy, or the roadside guy that has a kiosk that sells some groceries, right? He's not thinking of scale at that moment. He's thinking of, how do I make money to eat today and tomorrow and for my kids and to feed for the month, right? So with that, he's able to prudently manage his resources, make money, and gradually scale. I think that has to be the unique approach for most African startups. We need to think about ourselves as small businesses and actually as businesses. Because startup has become, oh, look, we're trendy, we're a startup, we'll make an app. Yeah, how will you make money? We'll get investment and hopefully, that won't work here. So you've got to be a business, right? So, and you've got to be a business, and you've got to assume that you're not going to get invested in.
And that's not the kind of advice that would go down in Silicon Valley, I'm sure, where the point is to basically have a great idea and attract money to it for as long as it takes to figure out how to make money.
Yeah, do you know, Andile, the irony is that this advice may not fly even to anyone. However, this is exactly what investors invest in, even in Silicon Valley or here. So, and the more the traction, the more the users on the platform, the more revenue is going through a platform, not even net profit, just revenue, the more investors get interested in investing in that kind of platform. So that's it. So it's all about traction. So a startup has to build itself up to the point where it doesn't need investment, then it will get investment.
Some of the things we've come to expect from VCs based in Silicon Valley, they seem to have a certain touchy-feeliness to the business they do that perhaps is absent on the continent, where it's revenue boy, it's show me the profit year on year, show me that hockey stick graph, all that good stuff. Whereas this idea that a good idea that could blow up could come from anywhere. And I suppose if you've got Tim Draper as a partner and you use Skype every day, you're kind of reminded of how easily a really simple seed investment can turn into a really big idea. And so I suppose that colors some of the enthusiasm they have. But he did say at the end of that comment that there seems to be a return to fundamentals like revenue, like profitability, and that kind of like. Given how well you've done relative to many startups who go out looking for funding, what comes to the surface in terms of personal insights or epiphanies in that regard?
I encourage any entrepreneur to actually go through and study what investors look at when they make an investment. I think knowing that they pay attention to more emotional stuff like the quality of the team, the relationship of the founders, the market, rather than just the fundamentals, makes you also appreciate that as well. So I think before we even started, we wanted to make sure that we had the most amazing team possible, that everyone was super committed, that the idea was worth pursuing and could get us up in the morning. And then the next step is obviously building a solid business model on top of all of that. But reverse engineering the investment process is very useful for entrepreneurs as well. I think that the move to profitability is going to be a little bit different on the continent. I think it's a reaction to how tough economic conditions can be for a startup to operate in, whether in America that means move to profitability because the funding is drying up. On the African continent, I think it's because it's hard to get that revenue cycle, the revenue engine moving in an African startup. So I think what Toro is saying there is be sustainable, build something that you can keep going even if funding is not there. So I think that's what he means, rather than not wanting to back a seed, an idea. I think he's still very big on ideas.
Definitely. I do think many of us who fancy a play at the startup vibe, look at an Instagram or what's another good example of someone who hasn't made money? Snapchat, we look at things like that as the perfect scenario for us. If we could just access this incredible pool of venture capital to fund our dreams and help us work with our people we like and in these amazing offices and just, and exit with these profound, profits in hand. I suppose that's the dream. However, I think, again, like you say, for many African startups, it's probably unwise to go in betting on that kind of scenario panning out for you.
Yeah, I mean, the survey we discussed earlier is kind of proof, right? Most startups don't make it. Most startups don't ever hit that hockey stick curve. And so you need to look for other sustainable ways of keeping your dream alive, and usually that's revenue.
Absolutely. Now, a big thank you to you, Trevor Wolf, for joining me on the show today. Listen, everybody, be sure to visit delv.io to see what Trevor and his team are up to. That's DELV.io. And sign up if you're a leading creative in your field and join that amazing database and be part of this success story in the making, we hope. A thank you also to Maya Horgan Famudu of Ingressive. You can check out her business at ingressive.co. And also a big thank you to Toro Orero of Draper Dark Flow for featuring on this week's show. You can check out all the work they're doing at draperdarkflow.com as well as speedupafrica.com. Now, you can follow me on Twitter at Masugu Andile for links to the full-length conversations I had with both Toro and Maya in the spirit of celebrating freedom with the American people. I thought I'd release 2 of those conversations at the same time. Go check them out. They'll be there waiting for you. I'll certainly retweet a link to my conversation with Trevor Wolf that we recorded in 2015. Now, he was the MD of Spring Leap at the time. He has since left them to start this brand new business we were talking about today. I'll certainly have to plan another sit down and full-length conversation for us to unpack everything you've learned since then. But you can certainly catch up on a lot of the things that he's learned, mistakes he's made. He's easily one of the most candid individuals I've ever had a conversation with on mic. Lots to learn from his story. A candid take on rising from failure, and you can also find the link to that on my Twitter page. But otherwise, once again, this episode of the African Tech Roundup is very kindly brought to you by FreshBooks. Now, FreshBooks is offering listeners of the African Tech Roundup a 30-day free trial to put their service to the test. All you have to do to find out if all the fuss is worth it is try it out for free at gofreshbooks.com/African Tech. Now, if you're looking to get organized, save time invoicing, and get paid faster, that link again, gofreshbooks.com/African Tech. Now, that's the week's show, folks. Catch me again next week, Monday, on AfricanTechRoundup.com at 9 a.m. Central African Time. Otherwise, I'm Andile Masugu. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you once again, Trevor Wolf of Delv.io.
Great to be here, Andile.
Happy birthday, America. Take it easy, Africa. And love all over the world.